As the Jets explore potentially upgrading their depth at tackle, they suffer an injury at the position. We're talking Duane Brown's visit, Mekhi Becton's injury, and more on today's episode of the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, August 8th, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GettingGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making this show your first watch or your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit that subscribe button, and you'll never miss an episode. You'll get new notifications as new episodes are posted. If you're watching on YouTube, please give the episode a thumbs up. Helps the channel out, and it helps other fans find the podcast. Our episode today is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, since we last spoke, quite a bit has happened at the tackle position for the New York Jets. They brought in veteran Duane Brown over the weekend because depth is lacking. Unfortunately, Monday there was another reminder that depth is lacking because Mekhi Becton suffered an injury at practice. It's to the same knee he injured last year, the same knee that cost him the final 16 games of the season. Late last week, there were some reports that at some of the practices, Becton was wearing a knee brace to provide extra stability. Maybe the knee was not feeling all that well. Maybe he was struggling with it a little bit, and he limped off the field Monday, did not return to practice. Now, the good news, to the extent there is good news, is head coach Robert Saleh, after practice today, said that their preliminary examinations indicated that the injury is not serious. So I think Saleh is trying to prevent Jets fans from worrying. But let's be honest, most Jets fans are going to be very worried at the news Mekhi Becton has a knee injury. And a lot of it's based on what happened last year when the Jets kind of indicated there wasn't anything to worry about. And the fact of the matter is, if it's the same knee as it was last year, cost him the last 16 games of the season, you want to know that he's past that injury. Becton's a really important player for this team. Big year for Zach Wilson. Jets are trying to support him with a good supporting cast as best they can. A big part of that's going to be the run game. And the Jets are counting on that right side of the offensive line with Becton and Vera-Tucker to go out there, push people around, make the run game easier, keep Zach Wilson out of bad downs and distances, keep him out of obvious passing downs. Not only that, limit the need for Zach Wilson to do big things. You want to just be able to hand the ball off and get some decent gains. That makes life much easier on a young quarterback. And I equate Mekhi Becton in importance this year to kind of what Carl Lawson was last year. And I said this before Lawson got injured, but I felt like heading into 2021, the player the Jets could least afford to lose was Carl Lawson. And then, of course, they lost him in preseason for the entire season. Now, why did I say that? First of all, because he played a really important position. Your edge rusher. That's your guy. That's typically your top guy generating pressure on defense. But beyond that, the Jets really did not have much past Carl Lawson in terms of depth. And you look at the tackle position for the Jets this year. Becton's, again, really important. Jets are counting on high-level play from him at the right tackle position. There's not really any depth past him. I mean, you look at the guys the Jets have. The Jets have Connor McDermott. I mean, Connor McDermott made a fun play last year when he caught that touchdown against, I think it was Jacksonville. But you don't bring in a tackle in today's NFL, or anybody's NFL, to catch passes. They're the block. It was an ugly exhibition of blocking from him last year. Chuma Edoga, a former third-round pick who never really developed. Max Mitchell, a guy who maybe down the line could be a decent backup tackle for the Jets, but not a guy you're counting on this year. I mean, a fourth-round pick, it's a lot to ask him to be able to step into the lineup. And today, with George Fant still kind of coming back slowly from injury, the Jets have him on a pitch count, their term. They're trying to bring him back slowly, so they're not playing him through the full practice. They're kind of limiting his snaps in practice. After Becton left today, for a good portion of the practice, your tackles were Max Mitchell and Chuma Edoga, and part of that is because McDermott suffered an injury in Saturday night's practice, so he's injured. or he suffered it was an injury late last week. I can't remember whether it was Friday or Saturday, but he suffered an injury late last week, although the Jets expressed some optimism maybe he'll get back. But today your tackles were Max Mitchell and Chuma Edoga. And, there are all these reports, the defensive ends had a great day. Well, of course they had a great day. They're practicing against Max Mitchell and Chuma Edoga. Those are the tackles they were going up against. Yeah, of course the defensive ends are going to dominate. You're not giving me any news there. And it just speaks to the lack of depth the Jets have at the tackle position this year. Last year, they kind of lucked their way into getting Morgan Moses because Moses was cut late. You could talk about what the Jets should have done this year as far as depth goes, but last year they kind of got, if we're being honest, they kind of got lucky that Morgan Moses was available when he was. It was at a point where most teams had spent all their cap space. The Jets had a little extra cap space, so they essentially got a starting caliber tackle for a pretty cheap amount, and he had to take a backup role at least for 3/4 of the first game of the season. Then after that, Morgan Moses stepped into the starting lineup. But this year, there's nothing behind Becton and Fant. So the Jets can afford an injury far less than they could this time last year. And it's because of the importance and because of the lack of quality depth at the tackle position. Jets are in trouble if any of these guys get hurt. Now, again, Saleh said that they don't think it's serious from the initial examination. And, they can check to see whether they're structured. An MRI is going to be needed to get the full diagnosis, but they can check the things, whether there's structural damage. They can understand on a high level whether there's something to be worried about. But you could be the most optimistic Jets fan in the world. You could be the most glasses half full person. You could be forgiven for being a little concerned today because I'm trying to think of a nice way to put this, but when it comes to Mekhi Becton and injuries, the Jets don't really have a lot of credibility. Last year when Becton got injured, when I first saw that injury, I thought he's done for the year. But then after the game, in the days that followed, the Jets said, well, this is not going to be so bad. He'll be back about halfway through the season. And then he never came back, and we never really got the full story on this. And the Jets have been very evasive when it comes to injuries. Now, in the NFL, like a week-to-week injury, I can understand a team being evasive. If a guy's got like an ankle injury, you may not want to publicize that if he wants to play the next week, because then the opponent will know he's got an ankle injury, and they'll target the ankle. I mean, that's what they do in the NFL. They're tough. If they know you're injured somewhere, they're going to make it a point to hit you there. And you technically are supposed to disclose that that's what the injury reports are that come out each week. But I don't understand why teams do this. New England is like the master of doing this, and the Jets seem like Saleh is the type of coach who's going to do this. They get very evasive, and they're not. It doesn't seem like they're always honest when we're talking about longer term injuries, and that doesn't make a lot of sense to me because you're not giving away any competitive advantage to know whether a guy's going to be here in 3 weeks or whether he's going to be here in 2 weeks. It's very, very strange the way the Jets handle this, and the way they handled Becton last year was odd, and they kind of made it seem like he was going to be back, and he wasn't. So there's nothing you could do to alleviate fan concern. And at this time of year, an injury is not really that big of a deal because we haven't even gotten to the first preseason game. I mean, look, we're like a month away from the first real game, and that's really the concern, is you don't want guys missing real games. As much as you'd like, especially a younger player, to be in the lineup for preseason games, as much as you'd like him to get the practice reps, especially on the offensive line, really get to know the guy playing next to him, guy who's changing positions like Becton, moving from the left side to the right side, get reacclimated to the right side, even though he played there a lot in college. These things matter, but at the end of the day, your biggest concern is somebody being ready for week one. The problem with this, though, is that it just brings back those memories of last year. And I've said this plenty of times. Becton, when he's been on the field to this point in his career, has been a good to very good player. And that's promising, first of all, because of his physical tools, but second of all, he's still learning he doesn't really know how to play the game completely, and he still was playing pretty well as a rookie. The question is, can he stay healthy? The question is, can he hold up? And it's not a case where you blame Mekhi Becton. You can't blame a player for getting injured, but there are always those guys in this league where you say they're great when they're on the field. It's just we wish he could get on the field more. He can't stay healthy. Is Becton going to be one of those guys? And this is why it's a big year. He's got to show he can stay healthy. And even an injury like this, even if he doesn't miss any time, there's that lingering doubt in the back of your mind. Can he stay healthy? Can he stay on the field? Can he give the Jets what they need? Because this year it's more important. There's no Morgan Moses around to help the Jets out. That's just the fact of the situation. So you get this injury, you get the team that's never been honest about this player's health before. bringing back the memories of last year. When's he going to be back? It's a mystery. We got to wait for the MRI. It's a lot to take. I would say I'm not in panic mode yet. My mindset's always I don't panic until I have a reason to panic. I don't feel like this is a reason to panic, but I can understand being a little upset. I'm not saying I can't say don't panic either, because I'll say don't panic. I will say don't panic. I can't say don't be concerned though. I think it's fair to be concerned. I don't think it's fair to panic. I think it's fair to be concerned though, because everything here with this particular player, it feels like it's more than just a regular camp injury. It's easy to make this into more than it really is, but it does feel like it's more than a camp injury. I think the Jets know, though, that they have issues as far as tackle depth goes. And that's why they brought in a veteran tackle this weekend for a free agent visit. We'll talk about Duane Brown. Should the Jets sign him? Would it be a good idea? I'll tell you what I think as we continue on this Monday episode of Locked On Jets. Of course, hindsight is 20/20. That's true when we're talking about what the Jets did with the tackle position in the offseason. It's true with life in general. But what if you could get a little help from your future self? Maybe you would ask to borrow a little cash, and now you can with Dave. Dave is a banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, buy a wedding gift, or catch up on bills. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hang-ups. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Thank you again for making Locked On Jets your first listen or your first watch every day. This show is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Mekhi Becton got injured on Monday, but the Jets were already looking to upgrade their tackle position over the weekend. They had veteran tackle Duane Brown in for a visit. Brown began his career with the Houston Texans, got traded to Seattle in a classic Bill O'Brien trade. I was looking at that trade over the weekend. I could not believe how little the Texans got for a quality tackle when they traded him to Seattle a few years back. He spent a couple years with the Seahawks. Former first-team All-Pro, had a couple second-team All-Pro selections, multi-time Pro Bowler. In fact, made a Pro Bowl last year, but I think you would probably guess that was based on reputation. Sometimes guys make the Pro Bowl even though they did not have a Pro Bowl caliber year just because you see their name and you think they're a star. And that seems to be the case with Duane Brown, because why would he be a free agent in August otherwise? As training camp begins and the guy wants to play this year, if he's still a Pro Bowler, he probably would not be unsigned. He was getting older. He's about to turn 37 at this point. And by the way, he's talking to the Jets about a backup tackle job. That sounds like a guy who's still playing at a Pro Bowl level. It's tough. You can criticize the Jets for not doing a better job with their backup tackle position, but here's the problem. It's not easy to find backup offensive linemen in the NFL. Offensive line play in recent years has been difficult to find, and anybody who's good usually has a team, and they don't hit the market because offensive line play is so hard to find. And if they do hit the market, they usually get paid big bucks, and they're getting paid to be starters. I mean, look at how difficult it was for the Jets to keep Morgan. I would have loved for the Jets to have kept Morgan Moses. The problem is that Baltimore was able to offer him a starting job. So the Jets couldn't. It was just a tough spot. Last year what happened was he got cut late. There was really nobody available. Really no spot available, so he had to settle for a pretty cheap offer from the Jets and take a backup job, which obviously turned into a starting job pretty quickly when Becton got hurt. But Moses wasn't available. And really what you need in the NFL is you got to hit on mid to late round picks and develop them into quality backups. And part of the Jets' issue is going back to 2019 when they picked Chuma Edoga in the third round. And yeah, I think when they drafted him, when Mike McCagnon drafted him, I think the Jets wanted Edoga. I think they had dreams of Edoga developing into a quality starter, maybe a guy whose game resembled Kelvin Beachum a little bit. And listen, if Mike McCagnon liked him so much that Mike McCagnon was using a day 2 pick on an offensive lineman, maybe that was some reason for hope. But at the very least, I think there was hope that Edoga could at least be a decent backup, and he really hasn't developed into that. And listen, you saw what happened in the McCagnon era. The Jets just did not draft offensive linemen, and the few that they did draft in the mid to late rounds did not develop. And so short of that, you're not going to have offensive line depth in this league. And I don't want to make excuses for Joe Douglas, but what I'll say is that you have to build the starters first. And I think he's done a pretty good job building the starters, and then after you build a good starting unit, it's a multi-year process to build. And then after you build a good starting unit, then you can start to focus on depth and getting quality backups in here. And it leaves the Jets in a tough spot because they're an injury away from, I don't know, having Connor McDermott start. I guess Connor McDermott's the top backup tackle, although I would have to guess Udoka's better. I mean, Connor McDermott just can't block anybody. And I think they know this, and to their credit, this happened before the Becton injury. So the Duane Brown thing was not a response to Becton. It was because I think they know they don't have enough depth. And I saw a few suggestions today now that Becton's heard the price is going to go up for Duane Brown. You need people interested in your services for your price to go up. Duane Brown doesn't seem like a very hot commodity right now because he's so old and because he's clearly in decline. Should the Jets sign Duane Brown? I view it kind of like signing Quan Alexander. And I know people are going to get upset with me because I've never been a Quan Alexander guy. Was that a great move by the Jets made? Is Quan Alexander a great player? Is he going to change the trajectory of the Jets linebacking group? Do the Jets suddenly have a great linebacker group because they signed Quan Alexander? No. I think people are overrating Quan Alexander. Does this mean I think signing Quan Alexander was a bad idea? Do I think it was a bad move? No, I think it was a good move. Why do I think it was a good move? Because your options are very limited at this time of year. We're talking August. Anybody who's good is already on a training camp roster for the most part, except for a hand. You have some guys who are coming off injuries, who maybe teams were waiting to see whether they're healthy. Sometimes you get a guy was a decent free agent, just completely overplayed his hand. Sometimes there's a veteran guy with a little bit left in the tank, but teams aren't completely sold on him. That was Quan Alexander. I think it's Duane Brown. I mean, do I think Duane Brown is anywhere near the level he was at his peak? Absolutely not. The guy who's clearly, and if you listen to Seattle fans, last year he was not the player he used to be. But is he better than Connor McDermott? Is he better than Chuma Edoga? Is he better than Max Mitchell? Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that. So that's where the signing makes sense. I think the Jets, I don't love the idea of having Duane Brown out there at this point of his career, but I like it better than Edoga or McDermott or Mitchell. And this is not an anti-Mitchell thing. I think Mitchell could be good in a couple of years. There's a reason he went in round 4, though. Game needs a little bit of work. So in the interim, it's not always what the good choice. At this time of year, there usually are not good choices. It's just what's the least bad choice. Duane Brown could be a less bad choice than the others. Joe Douglas, the other day when he spoke with the media about it, seemed like he was kind of expressing optimism. They did have Brown there for the green and white practice on Saturday night at MetLife Stadium. So perhaps things are moving. I don't know if the Becton injury makes them move a little bit faster. I doubt it increases the price the Jets are going to have to pay for Duane Brown. But to me, I think it's kind of a move that would make sense. It's just, you should not think, wow, the Jets are signing Duane Brown, the Pro Bowler, to be their backup. That's not happening. It's a move where you're getting a guy at the end of his career. Maybe you can squeeze a couple decent games out of him if you have to. But at the end of the day, Jets need Fant and Becton to be healthy this year. Duane Brown, better than what we've got, not as good as what we're expecting from Fant and Becton. And I think a lot of the things I said about the tackle position are true of the rest of the offensive line. We'll discuss tackles, we'll discuss guards and centers as we continue on this Monday episode of Locked On Jets. Well, the first preseason game is Friday. It's an exciting time of year, mainly because that means we're about 1 month away from the games beginning for real. And you should know that BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check on all your betting needs for the upcoming season. You can find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news for every league. It includes baseball, it includes the NBA, the NHL, it includes combat sports, esports, golf, and yes, the NFL. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information. From live in-game betting scores and podcasts, they have you covered. So head to BetOnline today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today. And in a month, the Jets take on Baltimore. You can put some money down if you think the Jets are going to pull the upset on opening day. BetOnline, where the game starts. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday. We're talking about the offensive line for the Jets. We've talked about the tackle position. We've talked about the lack of depth. I think the same thing's true of the interior spots. You look at the three guys in the interior for the Jets, Laken Tomlinson, Connor McGovern, and Elijah Vera-Tucker. On paper, that looks good. I mean, on paper, this looks like a really solid Jets offensive line. I mean, when you think about where the Jets were 3 years ago, back in 2019, that disaster offensive line, which had not been addressed all offseason by Mike Maccagnan, had not been addressed for years by Mike Maccagnan or John Idzik before him, or even Mike Tannenbaum the last couple of years. They've come a long way in 3 years. But I go back to what I said. It took 3 years to build this thing, and they could only build the starters. Now that the starters are hopefully set, maybe in the next year or two, they can really begin to build depth on the interior and on the outside at tackle. But for the time being, it's tough because you got to hit on some draft picks. I mean, the quality backups, they're not available in free agency, and if they're available, they're getting starting job offers. So I mean, let's look at some of the guys the Jets have for backups on the interior. You've got Dan Feeney. I gotta say this, Dan Feeney actually was decent Dan Feeney was better than I thought he'd be last year when he was pressed into action. But a guy who was one of the worst starters in the league during his time with the Chargers, and I'm not sure he's going to be able to sustain the level of play he showed late last year, where I thought he was actually pretty decent. I mean, look, if he was that good, odds are he would have had a better job offer. I mean, some of these guys, you got Parker Ferguson, who's a backup, listed as a backup lineman. You got Grant Hermans, you got Derek Kelly. It's just not. There's just aren't many people there. Isaiah Williams. The one guy who could be decent is Nate Herbig, who has some experience with the Eagles. Jets were able to get him off waivers. Hopefully that's the guy who can step in if there's trouble on the interior. He was waived by the Eagles. It was a bit of a surprising move because he actually had some decent play on his record. But those are the types of moves. If you want to have line play, I mentioned the ability to develop late-round picks. Another spot is potentially the waiver wire. Maybe you find a guy who is on a team where he doesn't really fit the scheme, and maybe he fits your scheme a little bit better. The bottom line is that premium resources can't really be used on backups at most spots. Maybe it can a little bit at the quarterback position, but elsewhere, it's really about player development, and it's really about the less heralded guys, the guys who are at the bottom of your roster, the guys who would be at the bottom of other rosters, just uncovering them and developing them. And really it goes back to your offensive line coach. So, you look at the situation, I mean, it's easy to say the Jets don't have offensive line depth, but there really aren't many teams that are built to sustain an injury on the offensive line. I think if you look this year, the Jets actually have a decent starting unit, which is more than you could say in quite a while, but it comes down to whether people can stay healthy. And while I'm not in panic mode over Becton's injury today, I think you have to have a little bit of concern because it's not necessarily that big of a failure, I think, for the coaching staff in the front office to lack depth. You just need to get lucky. You need to be able to have guys stay healthy. You need to get as many games as you can out of your starting unit. And people hate to say it because you like the idea that the cream always rises to the top, but sometimes the teams that have successful seasons are the teams that are the luckiest when it comes to injury depth. And you just have to hope that Becton's injury is not that serious, that he comes back quickly, that this is all a distant memory by opening day, and that the rest of this line is able to stay healthy as well. Anyway, that's all for our episode today. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Once again, I'd like to give a big shout out to subscribers to this podcast. If you'd like to join that group and get the shout out every day, just hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening or watching, and you'll never miss an episode. You'll get notifications as new episodes are posted. Please, if you're listening on a podcast source, give the show a 5-star review. It helps us out. It helps us rise to the top of the rankings. Same can be said if you're watching on YouTube. Please, a big thumbs up to this episode. And I hope you have a great Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.